How will President-elect Trump influence the lame duck session of Congress? We'll talk about that in this edition of Tune In.
Hi, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Here's your host, Representative Rick Crawford.
And we are back for another edition of Tune In. We have the entire delegation with us here, our House delegation. And guys, thank you for being here this morning. And kind of wanted to talk about what we expect for the lame duck session. And you may notice we're arranged numerically, 1, 2, 3, 4, not by accident. However, for the sake of lame duck, I want to start with Steve, who is an appropriator.
Thank you.
We can say, because that's going to be a topic for discussion for you to talk about how we're going to fund the government to get us into the next year.
Well, as you know, we funded the government, the discretionary part of government, which is the government that most people are familiar with, before we left to go back and campaign for re-election. And we did what we call a continuing resolution. It is only basically a number that is based on previous year's appropriations. And we approved that number to run the government at the same amount of money through the 9th of December, knowing that we're going to go back after the election, come to the lame duck session, and then pick it back up from there. I am no fan of a CR. I'm not real sure any of my colleagues around the table are any fans of a CR, because what we lose in the process are a lot of the policy writers and the language in these appropriations bills that our committee spent a lot of time putting together that are a reflection of the values and the direction of the government that we all like. Here's what I think you can expect. That we're probably going to do a CR, another CR, for the 10th of December, probably through the end of March, would be my guess. At least that was the early indication when I talked to the chairman of appropriations yesterday. And then that will give us time to work with the administration on its objectives, its priorities, to finish the fiscal year funding through the end of September. That's what my guess is going to be.
French, your sense of how the election impacted that decision to do CR versus Omnibus, do you think that had anything to do with it, or are we essentially kind of trying to allow us to get to the next administration and sort of reset the priorities and reflect maybe a broader reflection of people?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, the continuing resolution, though, does delay government programs, and that's a good deference to an incoming Trump administration. So that's the positive. The negative is that we still haven't passed the defense authorization bill, and therefore we haven't passed the defense appropriations bills, and we have wars going on. Mm-hmm. And I think an important distinction that certainly Steve talks a lot about is that with a CR, you can start no new programs of any kind, right? Including orders for certain kinds of defense material that we need in the fight. So longer CRs that's the downside. So I wish we could do a defense authorization bill, and I was shocked, honestly, that with a Trump victory that the Senate Democrats didn't cave and pass the the defense authorization bill, which we have passed on time, as usual, back in the summer and sent it to the Senate.
So we've done our work here quite a bit, and not just this last year, but it seems like, Steve, you've been here as long as I've been, and year after year we've done this. Bruce, you're on the budget committee. It's got to be frustrating for you. I know that from the standpoint of the work you do on the budget, sort of hammering out the blueprint for how we spend.
Yeah, and it's like Steve said, the Appropriations Committee did all 12 appropriation bills. If you look at the percentage of the discretionary spending that we actually passed out of the House, it's over 2/3 of that. That's what regular order is when we do those appropriation bills. Mm-hmm. It's frustrating to put all that work into it, and then you come back to the CR. So hopefully in this new administration with the Senate, we'll be able to do those appropriation bills and actually do authorization bills that change policy that we can address the debt, which is a huge part of what we look at in the budget. So we're all about regular order. I know this group is, and I know our listeners back home and constituents like to see regular order, but there's only so much we can do in the House, and we typically do our part in the House for the regular order.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think you might want to fact check me on this, but I believe it's 1994 was the last time the House and Senate completed for all 12 appropriations bills and did conference reports and the whole 9 yards. So, history is not really on our side at this point. Maybe we'll see that change in the new administration. Your thoughts on that, Steve?
Well, look, here's the real challenge for us is that all of us have come in since then. And most of our colleagues have come in since then.
Right.
The normal, what they consider to be normal, is what we're doing right now.
Right.
Because they've never seen regular order.
Right.
So you've got to be careful that that when you do a CR, and there are times when maybe a CR is necessary. I will not argue that point. But you just can't make it the new normal because that's what people focus on. And quite frankly, we've got, just to take national security as one example. This is just one. French mentioned this. You can't start new programs. So the European Reassurance Initiative, that is such a huge part of our warplane going forward, based on what Putin's doing in Eastern Europe, there's a lot of that ERI because we plus it up with new numbers, with new money. That ERI is sitting there kind of simmering right now. That's a real danger for that part of the world. So that's just one of hundreds and hundreds of things that you can't just execute because of the CR.
Right. Let me break this down just a little bit. Continuing resolution, French. I'm not sure everybody really understands what that means, but as the name implies, it's just a continuation. And what we've seen, particularly since Steve and I have been here, since you and Bruce have been here, operating under CRs, essentially deferring to the administration to sort of set the spending priorities. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, you weaken the first branch, the Article 1 branch powers of the Congress with the CR. I mean, one of the biggest complaints I think we all have as Republicans in the Congress have been the executive overreach activities of 8 years of the Obama administration. And Democrats may have felt the same way about George W. Bush. But the point is, if you use CRs, you have no ability to take the people's House and the Senate and direct the spending priorities or the policy priorities of the administration. And you just abdicate to the federal bureaucracy and get them more power, more authority. And the courts are fighting back now somewhat because of the work of the House of Representatives, I'll say, whether it's on Obamacare or on the WOTUS rule or on overreach and immigration. It's all because of the work, I think, in the House, no offense to the Senate,
right,
that we have set up the policies and procedures to fight that in the courts. But we should be fighting it annually by our appropriations.
So there's a level of frustration here. As legislators, we have had to defer to the judicial branch to essentially address some of these issues, and it really comes down to spending. Bruce, do you think, from the standpoint of what we've seen, as Steve alluded to, this being the new normal? Most people don't understand. Most folks that we serve with were not here in 1994. There are a handful left over. So we've got this new normal. How much of a hindrance do you think that's going to be going into a new administration? That we've struggled under this administration. We've gone from CR to CR, and now we're trying to sort of reset and reestablish that Article 1 authority. How much of a challenge do you see that being going forward?
But it's something we have to do, in my opinion, because if we really want to reclaim the Article 1 constitutional power of the legislative branch, it starts with those appropriation bills. There's a lot of policy changes we can make to have like the Reins Act, where we have to approve rulemaking by the administration. But if we're serious about reclaiming those Article 1 powers, it starts front and center with the appropriation process. It's something we could, nothing really has to change in the House for that to take place, other than we have to be able to work with the Senate to get appropriation bills that can get on the president's desk. So that's going to be a big part of my focus in the next Congress.
Well, we'll wrap it up here around the horn. I'll start with you, French. Final thoughts, wrapping up this year, going into next.
Well, it's been a good first term in Congress, but I do end it on the frustration that we can't do this most basic function. And so I urge our listeners that all work with us and that we hear from our constituents in Arkansas, insist on the Senate passing appropriations bills, encourage our Senators Cotton and Bozeman to fight in the Senate, encourage Senate Leader McConnell to, if people want to invoke cloture, to block an appropriations vote, make them come down to the Senate floor and stay there all night and see how long that lasts. Because that's the difference between getting our work done that we have been elected to do, I think.
Steve?
I think the word that I would throw out is patience. And I know it's hard because the country has been there's a lot of pent up anger and frustration. It was evidenced by what happened on Tuesday a couple of weeks ago. Be patient. The Trump administration is trying to get organized. We're trying to figure out who the major players are going to be in each one of those capacities. And the House will maintain a solid majority. The Senate will maintain its slim majority with a little bit of leverage, I think, coming in the midterms, I hope. So just be patient. We're going to have to sort this thing out to put it on the right track. But I think as much as I hate CRs, probably the strategy to get us into the next fiscal year, or, into the next calendar year under a new administration and let them help share their priorities with the governing majorities in the House and the Senate is something that absolutely has to take place. And I'm encouraged by the results and anxious for us to get to work.
Bruce, finish us off.
And one thing we didn't talk about here was an omnibus, which is different from a CR. An omnibus is where you take all those appropriations and roll them into one big bill and pass it. And I'm not hearing any talk about any kind of an omnibus, although things do change around here. But we have an opportunity through the budget process, a process called reconciliation, where there are a few issues that we can get in the Senate and bypass the cloture rule. So we can help the Senate and the House while working on a budget and getting the budget passed. But we've got a lot of headroom and a lot of opportunity in this upcoming Congress, and a lot of it's because of what's been done over the past 8 years in this previous administration, or soon to be previous administration. So that gives me a lot of hope and excitement to get back to work.
Good deal. Gentlemen, I appreciate you coming out.
You bet.
Good to be here. You
Happy
bet.
to do it.
Thanks for being with us on this edition of Tune In. Here's a look at this week's vote check. Don't forget to hit us up on Twitter @TuneInAR1, @TuneInAR1. We'll catch you next time. Thanks.